really happy that you're with us. Thank you for joining us. We've got a lot to talk about. I was just telling them, we're going to be talking about alien abductions tonight. We're going to be talking about ghosts tonight. We're going to be talking about if we get to it, we'll have time, we're going to be talking about young Earth, old Earth type issues. Is the Earth really young, like 6,000 to 10,000 years old? Is it old? A whole bunch of things that are going to be very, very interesting, I think, to you. Certainly not in the norm of things. And if you think Beyond has been abnormal up to now, wait till tonight. Tonight, we're going to be way, way on the outer reaches of probably sanity here. So I think you'll be interested. Lots of times people ask me, what have you been thinking about this month, or what's been on your mind? There's been a couple of things that's really been on my mind. One is I am really grateful for the mercy of God. And sometimes we confuse mercy and grace. And lots of times there's things that, I tend to be impatient. And I'm confessing right now. It says, confess your sins one to another, and you'll be healed and so on. And I'm confessing I have a tendency to be impatient at times. And I think it's the mercy of God that allows me to grow in working on my patience. But at the same time, He's merciful to me in that He doesn't give me what I really deserve for my impatience. I think there's maybe a lot of us that have issues like that. And we confuse grace. We think God gave me great grace because He didn't judge me in my mercy, but it's real, in my impatience, but it's not grace. That's not grace. It's really mercy. And there's so many things that God extends mercy to us for, but we confuse it with grace. Grace is the strength to overcome something, whereas mercy is you don't receive the judgment you should for whatever you do, okay? So it's anger or impatience or any number of different issues. It doesn't have to be huge issues like adultery or fraud or anything like that. It can be relatively small issues. But at the same time, those small issues can become really huge, and it's the mercy of God. And, Joseph talked about the mercy of God a lot and what he went through. And he recognized that God allowed him to go through things basically to save a bloodline, but it was His mercy, the mercy of God, that he didn't get really what he deserved. And even in the midst of the prison, he had incredible favor everywhere he went. I guess another thing I've been thinking about is the issue of Syria and what's gone on in Syria. And not that I have an answer for that other than God. That's definitely the answer. But what's going on in Syria right now is really a continuation of what we talked about in the Coming Perfect Storm video and what I wrote regarding that. And that is that there's going to be a systematic removal of moderate Arab leaders from every nation. Every nation has a moderate Arab leader. That leader is going to be systematically removed. And it started in Tunisia and Egypt, just as the Lord spoke and told me. And now it's gone on to Libya. It's now in Syria. It won't be long until it spreads to other Arab nations as well. It will eventually spread to Lebanon. It will spread to Jordan. It will spread. Any Arab nation that is thought to be moderate is going to have this type of thing happen to them. The problem is if you support the leader, then you're seen one way, and if you support the rebels, you're seen another way, and it ends up being a lose-lose. And you can take a look at Egypt right now. What happened there? We thought it would be one way, or our government thought it would be one way, and it turns out to be a totally different way. And so radical Islam is hoping to gain ground that way. And I'm not saying it's just radical Islam. I think there are forces at work that are inciting things. But that's been on my mind a lot lately too, especially as we're preparing to go to Israel. And yes, we're still planning on going. Unless the Lord tells me differently, we're planning on going. So I just wanted to bring that out and let you know that some of the things that I think about during the day are mercy and grace and the perfect storm and what's happening. And, just in the last in the last 30 days, there has been 22 major earthquakes around the world in the last 30 days. By major, I mean over 6.0. Over 6.0 in the last 30 days. That is a definite escalation of earthquake activity. And that's one of the things the Lord showed me, that would happen. But you know what the Lord not only showed me, he tells us in this incredible book called the Bible that there's going to be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. There's going to be earthquakes in diverse places, distress of nations with perplexity. So even in the Word, it tells us that. So we shouldn't be surprised. And yes, well, the Lord may tell us that this is really going to happen, and he reminds you of that. At the same time, it is in his Word. And if we just read that Bible more, so I think some wonderful things would happen. Well, and we'd recognize some incredible things that are happening, being able to say, this is that is written of. Well, let's get on, because we'll get right into the fray of things with this one. Deborah from Kerrville, Texas, wrote and asked this: what are your thoughts about all the television programs on paranormal activities? She says some of those programs even claim to have captured ghosts on tape. She also wants to know how to respond to people who ask about them. Well, so I have lots of thoughts. I mean, my mind goes really, really out there in some things. And I might surprise you in some ways and not surprise you in other ways. But let me just give you for example. I've had a number of staff people over the years tell me that they see angels or lights, and we're going to be talking about lights a little bit later, but angels and or lights in our offices, and that we'll be rushing into one of the offices, and it seems like they go into mine a lot. I tell my staff it's because I need help, and they're rushing because I need help quick. So, but we also have seen, some of our staff have seen like full-figured angels walking through the hall and can tell you what they look like, tell you what they're wearing, and it undoes them. So it's not like, oh, good, I got to see an angel. It's like it undoes my staff. They're undone. Let me rephrase it. They're undone. And so I think that those type of things, angelic activity, can happen. Absolutely. Now, are all things that people see angels? Absolutely not. No. But at the same time, there are spiritual things that happen. So if it's not angels, what is it? Well, then the second thing we have to ask ourselves is, why is there such a proliferation of things on ghosts? I mean, you got celebrity ghost stuff, you got cave ghosts, you've got My Haunted House, you've got ghostly encounters. I mean, you got all kinds of stuff that's out there. Why is that on TV? I can tell you why. Because people want to see it. So now the question is, why do people want to see it? They want to see it because they are hungry for something, for an itch nobody's answering. They may have had an experience. They may have thought they saw something. They may have a friend who saw something. Or, Joel 2, the prophet Joel in Acts 2 simply says this: I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. It didn't say on just Christians. It said on all flesh. When God's Spirit gets poured out on all flesh, there is an adjacent hunger that comes along with that Spirit being poured out on you, and it creates a hunger for spiritual things that you're not particularly used to. So it's on because people are hungry for something that the church is not giving them an answer for. Now, on the other hand, is the church supposed to embrace ghost caves or cave ghosts? No, I'm not saying that. Are they supposed to embrace celebrity ghosts? No, I'm not saying that either. I'm saying that there's an incredible world of supernatural things that happen in here that blows everybody's minds if you just had eyes to see and ears to hear. So my producer, Carol, has put together a short little video on all of these things. Let's take a watch, and then I'm going to comment.
The Bristol train station has allegedly been haunted since a tragedy from the late 1800s.
I believe it was in May of 1895. She wanted to leave her husband, and her husband didn't want her to leave. And as the train came into the station, he grabbed her and threw them both on the tracks, and they were both killed. Supposedly witnesses seen the head of this lady rolling across the tracks.
Robert Rose and Amanda Hall are investigators with the Appalachian Truth Seekers. They say they captured an eerie presence on camera. Hall says it pushed her.
Are you a bully? Is that what you are? Stop.
The group claims the entity talked back.
EVP comes back in a male voice and says, "I did not do it."
And they say there was no one else in the building when they say they captured something else.
Seeing a solid black shape just walk backwards and gracefully backwards. It's absolutely one of the most frightening and also amazing things I've ever seen. We don't know what that was.
Now, what do you think about that? Could it be real? Could it be fake? Could it be somebody's voice like, "I didn't do it"? It could be any of those things. But let me back up, because I think it's important to make a connection here on this level. That is, first of all, do I believe that these are dead people that didn't go somewhere after they died? No, I do not believe that. I don't believe that at all. Do I believe that people can stick around for a little bit after they die? Yeah, I do believe that. I mean, people have been dead for an hour or more and come back to life. I was gone for 45 minutes and came back. So I do believe that can happen. For example, in Jairus' daughter, when Jesus went to heal Jairus' daughter, he came to them and said, she is not dead, she is asleep. Now they laughed at him and said, she's dead. But what he was referring to wasn't that her body wasn't dead, it was that her spirit was still there, okay? So her spirit had not left her. Now, what he did is he spoke to her and commanded her spirit to come back to her, and her spirit did. But we're not talking years later here. We're not talking days later here. We're talking an hour, maybe 2 or 3 hours, depending on how long it took him to walk there, because on the way there, by the way, a woman with the issue of blood was healed when she touched the hem of his garment. So there was some time involved in his getting from point A to point B. But it wasn't years later, it wasn't decades later. So what are we really looking at here? I believe this. I believe that just as angels can show themselves to people and draw them towards God, I believe fallen angels can show themselves to people and attract them towards a different God. Absolutely. And so they can take the form of anything they want to. They can come and look like you, like Peter's angels came and looked like him. So they can take on the visage of a human. They can appear and disappear depending upon their rank in Satan's system, because there is a ranking there, an authority system within his own deal. So it's really not an authority, it's really a power system. What you have the power to do, what you have the power or ability to convince humans that you're doing. All those cause you to rise in rank. And so when we take a look at these type of encounters, then what ends up happening is, I believe that what we're seeing the issue of demonic forces trying to capture the heart of the people that are watching, and they're high-ranking because they have certain capabilities to do that. Let's take a look at the woman's death. Husband grabs her, throws them both onto the railroad track. Who do you suppose did that? God? No. So what better way to keep alive the thought of, look what I did to these humans, if it's a demonic force, which I think obviously it was. Look what I did to these humans, than to continually, once in a while, start showing up and appearing and capture the attention and going, oh my goodness, the ghosts are here. So these really are attempts to capture the heart of the unsuspecting. Spiritually hungry, but unsuspecting, or those who don't know a lot about what's going on. And so the shadowy figure on the second floor, I think it was the exact same thing. The audio recording, I think it was the exact same thing. How do you know that? What do you mean? What makes you think that they can speak? Because angels came and spoke. Peter's in prison. The angel said to Peter, "Get up. Put on your clothes. Follow me." I mean, that's pretty clear. So if unfallen angels can speak and humans can hear them, why can't fallen angels speak and humans hear them? I do not believe we're looking at disembodied spirits. I believe when you die, at some point very quickly, you either end up going to paradise or you end up going to Sheol. And you're there until the judgment seat. You don't get to get out. You don't get to get out of Sheol. God can do whatever he wants to in paradise. He can, great cloud of witnesses, he can send you back, etc. I understand that. And I'm not negating that. But what I am saying is that every person that dies, they end up going somewhere. And they go there pretty quick. It's not like a decade later. It's not like a year later. They go there pretty quick. But why? Because guess who has control of death, hell, and the grave? Jesus does. We're told that. And all authority above the earth, on the earth, beneath the earth, all authority is his. So it means he's got authority over Sheol. He took the keys to death, hell, and the grave. He took the keys to Sheol. So when we really stop to think about through the processes of the spiritual thing, this is what we come up with. So I think, anyway, I thought it was pretty interesting. And thank you, Carol, for putting that video clip together. We're going to have a lot more of those type of things because I think it really adds to the understanding of what we're talking about. Okay, another question. This question comes from the Streams Facebook page. How about that? Some of you probably didn't even know Streams had a Facebook page. I have a Facebook page, John Paul Jackson. But Streams has a Facebook page too. And if you want to know what's going on in Streams, that's the place to find out. It's on the Streams Facebook page. So you might want to check that out. But Nirvana. Kale asked this: is it true something white in a dream means that God sent it? Even if it's a snake or a spider or a gorilla, a tiger or a witch doctor. If so, why would God put that in my path and how can I avoid it? A very good question. While yes, it is indicative that if something is white may be from God, the context of the dream will tell you whether it really is from God or not. So let's just take, for example, what does a white snake represent? A white snake would represent somebody who's going to tell a falsehood about you and is going to pretend to be religious and godly when they do it. See? It's like a facade. It's like the proverbial wolf in sheep's clothing. So you have a snake who's put on white clothing. Same thing with alligator. What would that mean? It appears godly, but it has a big mouth and it's vicious and it can kill you with its tail. T-A-L-E, not T-A-I-L. Its tail, because its tail, the alligator's tail, is very muscular and can literally kill you just by hitting it so hard. Okay, so the question then is, why would God put it in my path? Well, perhaps he didn't. Perhaps he's just letting you know what is coming so you can avoid it. He gives you a dream to keep it from happening. If you know it's coming, then don't go down that road. If you're driving a car and you're on Hemphill Street and you realize you have an accident on Hemphill Street on the 29th of October, you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going down Hemphill Street on the 29th of October. You can count on that. So I avoid it. He gives me the dream to help me avoid the issue. Or if God did put it there or allow it, it might be meant to make you stronger, so when you overcome it, you're now prepared to do even more damage to the empire of darkness. So that could happen. Keep in mind Job 33, 14 through 18. It basically says these three things. He gives you a dream. He speaks in many ways a man does not perceive it, in a dream or a vision of the night. He gives these to you to keep you from the sword. That means something the enemy has planned to hurt you very bad. He also gives you these things in order to keep you from falling into pits or traps that the enemy has set in the road for you. You don't see them. You may be preoccupied with what's going on around you, like circumstances and situations. So you don't see them, but they're there nonetheless, and you fall into them. Much like the pit with the stakes in it that they cover with leaves and straw and stuff, and you step on it, it collapses with you. The enemy has set traps for us, and the Lord wants us to know how to avoid those traps and even recognize that those traps are there. So very important. And then the third thing he gives you dreams is so that if you did fall into the pit, he gives you a dream to help you get out. Gives you dreams to help you get out of the trap, helps you get out of the pit, helps you get out of the detour and back onto the road that you were on. So, but keep in mind, white does not automatically mean righteousness or holy or pure. It may be a disguise, and the context of the dream will tell you if it's a disguise or not. Okay? We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. Don't miss it, because you won't want to miss what we're going to talk about next.
John Paul Jackson has spent more than 30 years studying dreams and mysteries and how they apply to God and the Bible. So it was only appropriate that his first television program bear the title.
A dream is a major mystery in people's lives. Until it's understood, it's a mystery. We need to know personally and be able to back up in the Word why we believe what we believe.
He's already been unraveling the mystery of dreams to thousands who attend his classes and watch his online programs.
So how do we handle that in the dream? Basically, you're the focus, and right here is the issue of the dark-winged birds.
Through the ministry he founded in 1993, Streams Ministries International.
I wanted to help people understand the principles of dream interpretation, as well as the principles of other mysteries in the Bible, like the principles of one of our programs is on justice. The universe doesn't give justice, and neither does Mother Nature, by the way. God is waiting to enforce the laws of the kingdom against the perpetrator that has wronged you, and that's Satan.
Another Dreams and Mysteries program examines the mystery of angels.
Could angels be a part of God's adjustment bureau?
Jackson, known for his gifted insight, takes on the topic for Dreams and Mysteries.
Understanding how this gift works is a continual mystery, one I've been studying my whole life. Join me as we explore the mystery of the gift of prophecy.
Who better to speak of these mysteries?
The Lord has blessed me with a lot of experiences and has blessed me by helping me to understand His Word. And I don't understand the whole, I'm not everything. I'm just saying that there are things I understand. And I want to teach others to understand it as well. Because if we learn the ways of God, we can know God more. I'm really happy with where we're going. You're going to see a lot of funny stuff coming on. Some that I didn't mean to be funny, and it turned out to be funny. And some we actually meant to be funny, so it'll be really good. Okay, here we go. We're looking at alien abductions. Alien abductions. Is this true? Can this happen? So let's start off with the very basics. In order to believe that there are alien abductions, you have to believe there are aliens. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, first, let me say this. Does the Bible say there are no aliens, other people on other planets? No. The Bible, I've not been able to find it anywhere, and then none of the guys I talk to, and they know a whole lot more about the Bible than I do, none of them know that the Bible, what the Bible says. They haven't found anywhere where it suggests that there might be life on other planets. So do I believe in alien abductions? Do I believe in aliens? No. Second, if I don't believe in them, do I believe that some people have had actual encounters with something then? And I say, yes, absolutely. Just as we started out the program saying, you can encounter angels in hallways. You can encounter angels that are so real they actually eat the food you cook, i.e. Abraham and the two angels and the Lord when they were warning him about what they were about to do to Sodom and Gomorrah. So obviously that can happen. Jesus, in his new glorified body, ate fish with the disciples when he came back to them at the Sea of Galilee. In fact, he cooked the fish for them, and he ate it with them. So there is a physicality in the spirit world that they can come from walking through walls or just appearing out of nowhere to being physical in stature enough so that they can eat, they can touch, you can feel them, you can and know that they're really there. Okay, now if they've had those encounters, I think there's some that fake it. I think some realize that they get attention out of this, they get their 15 minutes of fame out of this. So yeah, I understand that dynamic. But I think there's some real things, or at least people have felt they were real. So if they're not aliens, then what were they really encounters? And if they were real encounters, what were those encounters? And I think it may boil down to 3 or 4 different things. I think one is they could be trances where they saw into the invisible world and saw demonic forces there, and those demonic forces captured their attention. They were able to see them. Like people have seen angels walking in our hallway, you can see demons walking through a hallway if they were allowed to. Now, prayerfully, they'll never be allowed to walk through our hallways, but what if you're not saved? What if you're out in the world? Or what if you're doing any other things? Could there be demonic forces there? Because you've given them permission to. Paul says, whom you choose to obey, you become the slave of the one you choose to obey. So if you're not obeying God, guess who you're obeying? And if you're obeying him, the powers of darkness, then they have permission to come and do what they want around you. You've given them permission because you are now their slave. Okay, so these then could be demonic figures that are manifesting in a way. Why? Because they recognize you have a gift. They recognize you have a gift to see. I think a lot of the people that have had these experiences may have had the experience, but it wasn't what they thought it was, because it was manifesting as something that they could say, oh, it happened to me. And in a way, legitimize the demonic figure by saying it's an alien. Now, there's a divine logic to all this, and keep going here. Okay, so, for example, if the demon came up to you and said, I'm a demon, obey me, do you think you would? Probably not. I mean, how many, even if you're not serving God, you're out in the world, you told God to get lost, or you never knew him, demon comes up to you and says, I'm a demon, obey me. And you go, no. In fact, it might drive you to God. But what if the demon came up to you and says, I'm from another planet, and I have answers and solutions for your world? Now what? Now all of a sudden, you're not seeing them as a dark entity. You are seeing them as an answer to your problems or to the world's problems. And they've only been around a few, at least several thousand years anyway. Maybe who knows how long before time began. So they've been around for a while. And so they kind of know what people are like. They've only seen a few billion people come and go through the earth. They've lived a lot longer than you and me have. And so they're pretty insightful. Jesus says they're shrewd, way more than we are. And so if I'm a shrewd demon, I'm not going to tell you I'm a demon. I'm going to tell you I'm something so far off your grid, you'll believe it. Now, it could also be, in that whole genre, we've talked about Nephilim before, and I'm not saying that there are Nephilim, but I'm saying I have to admit that there's a possibility they could exist. I have to admit that because logic tells me they could exist. These half-spirit beings, or by now, they're probably 1/16th spirit being and 15/16 human being. I don't know what the exact ratio is there, but something about that. So what if the Nephilim came and in their physicality, knowing what they know, actually have developed some type of aircraft. And then present to you they are from another planet. And you know what? In a way, they are. Because they're not from this world. It's just on another planet. Heaven's not another planet. It's not like it's Jupiter. Heaven's not another planet. But they're not from this world. So what if they came and gave you answers? Because when the Nephilim came, and you hear what they taught before the flood, they taught about all kinds of alchemy. They taught about all kinds of spirit powers that exist in the invisible world. They taught about how to cast spells and make potions and how to capture hearts and love. And they taught about astrological signs and the zodiac. They talk or horoscopes. So they taught all this stuff, perverted it, obviously. And they taught all this to the children and to the wives that they took, or the women they took. So what if they've come and they tell you things like that, and you go, they told me answers to things. Now you say, well, some of the people that claim to be abducted actually felt like they were impregnated and then later had the baby taken from them. Well, let's just say that's true. Let's just say they were impregnated. Let's just say the baby was taken from them. Guess what that would make that baby? A child of the Nephilim, or Nephilim, right? Okay, now I'm not saying that happened, because all I am is I'm just throwing things out here to let you know. In reality, I'm not trying to gloss over stuff. I'm just letting you know, in reality, that type of thing could happen. I think they're from another planet? Absolutely not. I really don't think so. But there are fallen spirit beings. And you say, well, the Nephilim were chained. Yes, they were, but their offspring weren't. And their offspring, when they died, guess where they went when they died in the flood? Their offspring. Not the fallen angels themselves, because they're chained. Jude says they're chained until the day of judgment. What about their offspring? Offspring would be half Nephilim, half a human. Half fallen angel, half human. So when they died, they went to Sheol, and Satan controlled Sheol up until the time Jesus came. So guess what? If I'm Satan and the Nephilim come to me, I'm saying, hey, get out of jail free card. You don't have to stay here. So then he sends them right back out into the world. And then so we find out later that the giants of the land, who if you go back to the root Hebrew word, it comes from the Nephil, or like Og and his sons, and Goliath and his brothers, and so on. They all came from that Nephil line of DNA. So you have to say that. I have to say, this is possible. Do I think it happened? I tend to think not, but at the same time, it could. So I'm trying to be open, totally open here. And on the other hand, what they say could be false visions. Just literally false visions. Things that you see, when your mind doesn't follow what God wants you to do, then it follows a whole different line of thinking that the enemy wants you to do. And one of the two is going to capture your thoughts. Either God's going to capture your thoughts, or the enemy is going to capture your thoughts. Matthew 24 says this. When it talks about the last days and the end of the age, 3 times Jesus says, let no one deceive you. Let no one deceive you by signs and wonders when they're not from heaven. Let no one deceive you by claiming to be the Messiah when they're not. And let no one deceive you by saying that they're out in the wilderness, or they're out here, or they're over there. Let no one deceive you. Or take heed that you be not deceived, depending on the version that you're reading. He warns about false messiahs. Now, if you're going to be a false messiah, what better way to be a false messiah than to be a non-human false messiah? And say, I'm from another planet, and I have all the answers for you. Because I came here, because humanity is about to destroy itself, and I'm here to provide you with the answer. And I close this part with this. I had a friend. I still have that friend. And he was out in a farm he owned at the time, a number of years ago, out in one of the northern states. I'll just leave it at that. And he sees this craft come and land out in this pasture. So he goes out to the pasture, and the guys come out of the craft, And they were letting him know that we have an answer for the humans. We're from another planet, and we have an answer for the humans. And he said, well, we already had that answer. And they go, well, you can't. We're just coming. And he said, oh, no, we already had that answer. His name is Jesus. And they said to him, don't say that name. Don't mention that name. The guy says, Jesus? The Son of God? Who took captivity captive? That name? Don't say that name. You can't say that name. Anyway, long story short, they end up going back and leaving. So where do you think those guys were from? Were they just demons manifesting in some way? Could be. Were the Nephilim doing something? Could be. But I guarantee you they weren't aliens. They were spirit beings who had been conquered by Jesus, and at his name, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. Take heed that you be not deceived through all the things that are going to be claiming to be spiritual, because there's going to be a whole bunch of that going on. And if it were possible, even the very elect would be deceived. So 3 times Jesus said it. I think it was for a reason. It wasn't like, well, let's fill up this verse because I don't have anything else to say. Okay, another question from Poland. This comes from Chris Cole from Poland. And Chris asked this: how will the perfect storm affect the United Kingdom, and will devaluation hit the pound sterling? And so my answer is yes, it will hit the pound sterling. There's not a nation that is going to escape the financial turmoil that's coming. Some will be affected more than others because some of them are the leaders and some of them get wagged by the leader. It will be difficult for the UK to remain unscathed. They're going to be shifting to a gold-based economy. It's being pushed more than ever, but I'm not saying it because it's being pushed more than ever. I'm saying it because that's what's going to happen. There is a conflict right now between old money and new money. And that is the old money of the European old money that's kind of infiltrated the United States, and the conflict of the new China money. And this is a major conflict that is going on right now. The new trillionaires that exist and who is going to rule. There's also a conflict between the postmodernists and the progressives. And the basic difference between a postmodernist and a progressive is this. Postmodernists say we're going to change what we have into becoming what we want to be. And the progressive says we can't change what we have without destroying it, so we're going to destroy it and create what everybody really wants. They just don't know they really want it. We enlightened ones know, and we're going to do it for them, and they'll be so glad we did it for them. That's the difference between a progressive and a postmodernist. So it used to be postmodernism, but postmodernism now has moved on to progressive. So whenever you hear someone call themselves a progressive, this is what they're saying. We have to take down what exists in order to bring what we want to exist. And that means we have to create crisis, we have to create tumult, we have to create turmoil, we have to create a destruction in order to construct. It's not reconstruction, it is totally new construction. So Poland, Chris, just let me say this for you about Poland. Poland is to prepare, and I've said this years ago, I'm just saying it again. Poland is to prepare for the rise of Russia, and Russia's blackmailing them over the issue of energy and who's going to supply Poland's energy if they don't do what Russia demands. And years ago, I prophesied that that was going to come, that Russia was going to begin to escalate, that Putin and Medvedev would have a clash, and that Putin would win, and Medvedev would go by the wayside, but there was a third party waiting in the wings, and now we've seen Putin and Medvedev had that clash. Medvedev has just kind of disappeared from the scene, and Putin has risen to the surface, and he is going to do everything he can to make himself the ruler of a superpower in the world. And it will not be through honesty. So pray that Poland does not succumb to the blackmail of Russia over energy issues. All righty? Villia. Sorry if I butchered that name. Villia. It's from New Hampshire, and she wants to know, is cremation scripturally acceptable for Christian burial? Well, interesting. Cremation. So let's take a look. Most people who have a problem with cremation do so for about 3 reasons. One is they believe that it may have an impact on the resurrection, because the whole body, how will the body, if it's ashes, how will the body be raised? And they have a problem with it. The second reason they have a problem with it, because the lake of fire and cremation kind of look parallel to them. Isn't the lake of fire all about burning? And isn't cremation all about burning? So why would I want to do that? Well, that's one of the things they talk about. Then the third thing is they have this desire to protect the body as a temple of God. So we see this body as a temple of God, and that we want then to protect this body, even though it's buried, and even though 20 years from now we're going to uncover that casket and find out that there's not much left in that casket. There is that sanctity of the body. So then you go, okay, what does the Bible say about cremation? Did you know that the Bible tells there are 3 times that God says you can cremate? But they're all in judgment. It says this, Joshua 7:15, Achan, who took the accursed things. Now, what is a cursed thing? An accursed thing are idols that have been dedicated to demons. Those are called accursed things. And so he took an accursed thing and he took it back to the camp. And in verse 25, it tells that Joshua ordered the burning of Achan, the cremation of Achan and his entire family. So as a judgment. Leviticus 20:14, we're told that the man who lies with a mother and her daughter is to be burned, cremated. That doesn't mean like shot and then burned. It means burned and then shot. Actually, burned, dead, like burned alive. And then Leviticus 21:9 tells us that any priest, any daughter of a priest that becomes a prostitute is to be burned alive. So 3 times the Bible says cremation, but it has to do with judgment. But it does not say specifically don't be cremated. Christian burial is motivated basically by our view of life after death and the body and what happens to the body and the resurrection. But what about them? You have to be asked this. What about those who get lost at sea and become shark food and go through the processes and the shark excretes them and they become stuff on the bottom of the ocean? What about, and probably then, by the way, shrimp then eat that, and lobster then eat that, and other crustaceans then eat that as bottom feeders. So they're eating you. So, what about their resurrection? Is it any harder to go from ashes to a body or dung to a body? It's probably about the same, I would guess. Probably about the same. Or what about those who die and are burned in a house fire? Can they be resurrected? See, if we're using the argument that cremation keeps you from being resurrected from the dead, then what about those people that are burned in a house fire and die? Or like down here in West Texas, were vaporized. There wasn't even nothing left of them. Nothing. Zero. What about them? How do you put vapor back together again? So take a look. You have to take a look at that. So the question then becomes, if you die in a fire or become shark food, can you go to heaven? I think you can. See, I think that this incredible God that took the dust and made you and me from it, it's not hard for him to take poop. You know, stuff on the bottom of the ocean floor. Or ashes. Sorry, if you guys are out there, sorry. If I offended you, sorry about that. Just my Texan came out of me. I think it's not hard for God to do that. I think it's not hard for God to do that. So because right now there's more people being cremated than are being buried. Did you know that? We've just tipped the scale. There's more people being cremated than burying. Why? Because it's so expensive to bury people. The coffin, the gravesite, the funeral home. I mean, it's just so expensive. So I thought that was, I think I just needed to say that. Okay. Wowie. Ay, ay, ay. Okay, we got just enough time to do this. Young earth, old earth. So this question comes in. I don't know who sent it in. You didn't give us your name. What does the Bible say about the age of the earth? That's an incredible question, because it is really hotly debated. It was hotly debated till about the 1800s, and then they thought they had it all resolved, and now it's being hotly debated again. And here's what it boiled down. What is the young earth concept? The young earth philosophy or theology or approach is that the earth is 6,000 to 10,000 years old. And the old earth concept is that the earth is millions to billions of years old. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean, the old earth concept does not necessarily mean that it started out with a Big Bang, or that it didn't start out with a Big Bang. It's just that it is old. And so we have to take a look at some issues. First of all, we have to take a look at, when did time begin? Because that's the only way you can measure how old something is time had to begin. And time began on day one, when there became a past. Because when you hit day two, something existed before it. And on day one, something existed before it, because something was made, and then something was made again, and whatever was made on day one right after that was preceded by what was made before that. So time began on day one, but a way to measure time did not occur until day four. Measure time. And we know that time could not have been a 24-hour period prior to day four, because there was no sun to make it a 24-hour day. Does that make sense to you? And did you know grass grew and trees grew on day three before the sun? So how did photosynthesis take place? Sounds like Revelation, where there's no need of the sun or the moon, for the Lamb of God is its light. Well, anyway, so we have to think about that. So before Adam sinned, there was no, let me say it this way. Until Adam sinned, we don't know how much time went by. It could have been 1 billion years. It could have been one day. We don't know how long it was. It probably was more than a day, because that would have meant he was put in the garden and sinned the same day that he was put in the garden. That's right after he met Eve. So I don't know how all that would work so fast. I think he had lived there for a while and was subduing the garden, and when it happened. Then there's another interesting tidbit, and that's this. In Genesis 1:5, we have 4 words that we have to take a look at. One is the word day, and the other is night. So you have yom, which is day, which literally means an undetermined amount of time with heat. And you have lila, which means nighttime. So you have day, you have night. But then there's another, and it says this, it says, and the evening. So it separated the light from the darkness, and they called the light day, and they called darkness night. And the evening and the morning were the first day, or day one. So what is the word evening and morning? Is it the same word as day and night? And it's not. The word evening is the Hebrew word, Aramaic word, erev, and the word morning is the Hebrew word, boker. So you have erev, evening, but that is not lila, which was the word used for night. And you have boker for morning, but that's not the word yom, which is used for day. So what is the distinguishing factor between yom and lila and boker and Erev. And what we find is this. Erev, the root of Erev, means chaos. And the root of Boker means order. And so we find day one, chaos to order. And on day two, he took any remaining chaos and turned it to a higher order. And on day three, he took remaining chaos and turned it into a higher order. Same on day 4, same on day 5, same on day 6 when man was made. And then he said, up until that time, he said, and it's good. But when he made man, it became very good. In other words, he created a means of overseeing the order that he had brought to creation. Man was responsible for maintaining the order, and he was responsible then for not only maintaining the order that God had brought. God did not finish that. He left the earth unsubdued outside the garden, and he said, now, see what I've done? How I brought how I brought chaos into order and created this garden? I want you to go out there and take chaos and turn it into order. Subdue the earth and take dominion. And that's what Adam was to do. He was probably doing it. We don't know how long he was doing it. We know that Peter says, a day with the Lord is as 1,000 years as a day. And so we take a look at that. We know that it wasn't 24-hour days that he was talking about here. It had to be at least 1,000-year day, but we don't know how long the earth existed prior to him. Okay, I'm taking way too much time, but let me just go on and say this concerning the arguments. There's basically three real arguments that they come up to, and these three arguments come up between Genesis 1 and Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:3. Primarily in Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2. Okay? Genesis 1:3 begins what is now we know as the creation of the earth. The problem in this whole argument is what happened in Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. That's the argument. Boiling it down. I mean, I'm taking reams of papers and boiling them down to these arguments here. So that basically boils down to this. Your Bible probably reads like mine, in the beginning God created. The first argument is the word in is not in the Bible. It's not in the original language. So at the beginning God created. The second argument is this, is that the Hebrew word that is there is actually a verb, and their argument says that it literally reads, the beginning God had created the earth. That's Genesis 1, Genesis 2. Had created, meaning it existed. And then Genesis 1:3 says, and God began to separate the waters, the light, the darkness. God's Spirit hovered over the earth. That's the argument, that the actual Hebrew words, they argue, says had created, meaning the earth already existed. And it doesn't say it came out of a big bang. It could have or it could not. This is what they say. And it doesn't mean that God didn't instantly speak the earth into being, but he could have done it 8 billion years ago. That's their argument. So the young earth says that Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2 and Genesis 1:3 forward are all part of the same process. Old earth people say, no. Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2 happened millions of years, and then Genesis 1:3 took place, and everything from Genesis 1:3 now is 6,000 years. 6,000 to 10,000 years. From Genesis 1:3 forward to 6,000 to 10,000 years. Prior to Genesis 1:3, it's 1 billion years. So, that's that. Then the third one is, it goes back to this word in, which is the first word in the Bible. And the argument for an old earth is that it's 6 creative days of indeterminate time, meaning it wasn't even necessarily 1,000 years. It could have been 1 billion years, but indeterminate time. But Exodus 20, and the young earth people will say this. The young earth people say, because Exodus 20 says, for in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth. And again, their argument is the word in is not there. Not for in 6 days. It actually reads, they say, for 6 days. And they said that means that it does not mean 24-hour days or even 1,000-year days. It's indeterminate. Old earth believe in an instantaneous creation of heaven and the universe, but prior to 10,000 years ago, young earth believe that everything happened within the last 6,000 to 10,000 years. Which one is right? I don't know. I think, I'll tell you, I lean toward the young earth because I tend not to like anything that seems in any way to diminish God's power. So I tend to lean towards the young earth. And I also know this, that they discovered something when Mount St. Helens erupted, and what they discovered was what they used to think took tens of thousands of years to do, they found that took place in 18 months. So that's the erosion and so on. So that obliterated a lot of thinking. Also, it kind of got damaged when they realized carbon-14 does not have a constant decay, that it is affected by time and or heat. And then radioisotopes kind of got the same problem. It's decay, and they thought all of these carbon-14 and radioisotopes and other things, they all had a constant rate of decay, but they've now discovered they don't have a constant rate of decay, which can really mess up if you're dating something. So anyway, young earth, old earth, and mercy. We're out of time. We got a lot of questions yet? I know. Man, we got the 4 living creatures. Anyway, next month, we're going to finish the rest of these questions and other questions that you might send in to us here. God bless you. We will see you next month, and may all y'all have an incredible rest of the year.